Hello, welcome back to Too Sweet MTG, and welcome to Instant Deck Techs. In this series, we go over everything you need to build a certain commander. We'll go over the strategies and the types of cards needed you need to get the deck working. Any cards we mention will be down in the description below. In this video, we're going to be looking at Trazyn the Infinite. It is 4 black for a 4/6 legendary artifact creature Necron. It has Death Touch and Prismatic Gallery, which is as long as Trazyn the Infinite is on the battlefield, it has all activated abilities of all artifact cards in your graveyard. So there's two reasons you may have clicked on this video. One, you like Necrons, in which case, good news, this video will have some. Or two, you like combos and doing broken things. Even better news, this could be one of the most broken combo commanders ever printed. Getting all the activated abilities of all the artifact cards in our graveyard is insanely good. You can take the best lines of text for some really broken artifacts and combine them to turn Trazyn into a win condition. Before we get lost in the source, let's go over the game plan of the deck. This is going to be an artifact-based combo deck. There's an absolute bucket load of these combos all throughout Magic. Where Trazyn comes in is that to get them all working, all we need to do is to have the combo pieces in our graveyard and Trazyn on the battlefield. Trazyn will then get the activated abilities of the artifacts in our graveyard, so he'll be tapping and untapping to generate infinite mana and pinging out our opponents in no time. One of the reasons why this is very strong is that Trazyn is the commander, so we'll always have access to it. Also, getting cards into our graveyard, especially in black, is quite easy. There's a ton of really strong graveyard shooters and a ton of self-mill as well. So we'll be using these to fill up our bin and using the artifacts that we put in there to give the abilities to Trazyn to win the game. Another benefit of this strategy is that while people do play Graveyard Hate, it's generally less than regular artifact removal, so the pieces are more protected than they would normally be as well. Okay, let's start by going over some of the many combos that you can look to run in this deck. What we'll do is we'll go over the types of cards we're going to use first, and then break down how they work together. Remember, you need Trazyn in play, and the artifacts we're talking about in the graveyard. Trazyn also needs the ability to tap, so it either needs haste or to not have summoning sickness. First up is some untappers. These are cards that when they're in the graveyard, give Trazyn the ability to untap itself, normally for a small mana cost. You have things like Pili-Pala, Farmstead Gleaner, Staff of Domination, and Voltaic Construct. Staff of Domination is probably the best on this list, and the reasons why we'll get onto in a moment. Then you have your mana rocks. What you're looking for is rocks that tap for 2 or more mana. You don't need the super expensive ones either to get this working, as a mana crypt does the same job in our graveyard as a Dreamstone Hedron. Then we have some ping effects. These let us remove a +1/+1 counter to deal a damage to an opponent, so we're looking at things like Triskelion and Walking Ballista. And then we have Phyrexian Devourer. This is a very weird card, but when we give its ability to exile the top of our library to put X +1/+1 counters onto Trazyn, equal to that spell's mana cost, we should be able to take out a whole board of players. And then lastly, for our pieces, we have Aetherflux Reservoir. This lets us pay 50 life to hit an opponent, also for 50 life. A nice little Death Star backup win condition here. So those are all the pieces. Let's put them together and go over how we pop off. Remember, we need Trazyn in play and able to tap itself, and we also need these cards in our graveyard for these to work. First up, let's generate some infinite mana. To do this, you need a untapper and a mana rock in your graveyard. As long as the cost to untap the untapper is less than the amount of mana the mana rock makes, you'll be able to tap and untap Trazyn to generate infinite mana. Staff of Domination and Pili-Pala will work with any mana rock that generates 2 or more. Farmstead Gleaner and Voltaic Construct will then work with any rock that generates 3 or more mana. This is one of the reasons why Staff of Domination is the best out there, as it goes infinite with any mana rock that generates 2 or more when it's tapped, and has a load of other cool abilities that we can use when we have that infinite mana. You can use it to start drawing your whole deck, or you can gain infinite life. This is where Aetherflux Reservoir comes in. If it's also in our graveyard, Trazyn will have that ability to ping an opponent for 50 life. If we have infinite life, we can pay as much as we need to ping out our opponents. The other way you can win with infinite mana is with Walking Ballista. You can pay as much mana as you want to put a ton of +1/+1 counters onto Trazyn. You can then remove them to ping out your opponents. Talking of Walking Ballista, let's go over the interaction it and Triskelion have with Phyrexian Devourer. With either Ballista or Triskelion in the bin along with Phyrexian Devourer, we can deal damage to our opponents equal to the total mana value left in our library. Basically, you start exiling cards to the Devourer's ability, to start putting +1/+1 counters onto Trazyn. You can then remove those counters to deal damage to your opponent's life totals. As long as the total mana value of every card remaining in your deck is greater than your opponent's life totals, you'll just win the game here. For anyone wondering as well, Trazyn only gets the activated ability of the Phyrexian Devourer. It doesn't get that triggered ability that causes it to be sacrificed when its power is 7 or greater, which is pretty snazzy. I'm going to be honest with you, there are a ton more combinations and cool combos out there that work with this commander. The ones that I've mentioned I think will be the most consistent, but feel free to run what you think is cool in this section. Okay, so we have some of our combos. Next up, we actually need to get them into our graveyard so we can start popping off with Trazyn. First up, we have our graveyard tutors. These are cards that can go and get any of our combo pieces and stick them straight into the bin. You have Entomb, Unmarked Grave, Oriq Loremage, Vile Entomber, and Gravebreaker Lamia. These are fantastic, as specifically they can go and get artifacts, so are really versatile to get that exact piece that we need at the exact moment. You then have Buried Alive, which can go and get 3 creatures and put them into our graveyard. If those 3 creatures are Pili-Pala, Palladium Myr, and Walking Ballista, and as long as Trazyn is in play and can tap itself, means you will just win on the spot, as the Pili-Pala and the Palladium Myr will generate infinite mana that we can pump into the Walking Ballista to win the game. For some more straightforward self-mill, you have some creatures that dump cards from our library into our graveyard when they enter the battlefield. These are absolutely perfect, and they'll also give us some bodies to block while pushing our game plan forward. They're effectively draw spells in this deck, and also they can block nice and early, so we can survive through until we can combo off. After those, you also have some instant and sorcery spells that can help with the mill. Things like Corpse Churn, Ransack the Lab, Atrocious Experiment, and Dread Summons are all super budget options that'll do a great job in the deck. We then have some permanents that can repeatedly mill us turn after turn. Cemetery Tampering puts 3 cards into our graveyard every turn, and that hideaway ability should not be too hard to get off, so we can cast something for free. We then also have Out of the Tombs, which will start milling a ton of cards very quickly, and does lead to some cool endgame tech if we've ever milled too greedily. Moving over to our ramp, most of this is going to be on our mana rocks that we've already mentioned that add to our combos, so you're starting off with things that tap for at least 2 mana as your base. You have things like Sol Ring, Basalt Monolith, Sisay's Ring, Hedron Archive, Nyx's Lotus, Scepter of Eternal Glory, Gilded Lotus, and Dreamstone Hedron, to name just a few. Beneath them, and as a way of actually casting Trazyn, we have some cheaper mana rocks as well. These aren't really there to combo off, these are there to help us cast our spells. And then one last little bit of ramp with some self-mill tagged on for good measure is Milikanin, a really nice little card that gives us the ramp we need while filling our bin. Moving on to our card draw, because our commander makes our graveyard an extension of our hand, we're not going to actually need anywhere near as much as a normal deck. The self-mill kind of already fills this slot. But first up is a fair and balanced magic card in Bolas's Citadel. Paying life to let us cast cards off the top of our library is really good in a combo deck like this, where we're trying to see as many cards as possible to work to a win condition. In a similar vein, Mystic Forge lets us play all the artifacts off the top of our library as well. What's good about both of these is that the ability to look at the top card of our library whenever we want is really strong. This lets us know if we want to play that mill card or to save it after we've drawn or played what's on top. Those same mill cards can also then clear away any cards that we don't want on top of our library, so we can keep the spellcasting train going. You then have a big dumb artifact like Staff of Nin, which draws us a card every turn if it's in play. Or if it's in our graveyard, it can become a combo piece as well, as if you have any of the infinite mana combos that involve an untapper, you can use this to ping out all of your opponents. For some less combo-y but very consistent options, we have some black sorceries that draw us into our deck. Cards like Night Whisperer, Sign in Blood, Funeral Rites, Read the Bones, and Damnable Pact are great at refilling our hand as we hastily look for ways of putting those combo pieces together. Moving over to our interaction now, and we're a mono black deck, so we shouldn't have too many issues removing some troublesome threats from our opponents. First up we have some Necron flavoured removal with a buffed Ravenous Chupacabra in Necron Deathmark, or a fantastic one-sided board wipe with Their Name is Death. For some more traditionally themed removal, we have the Doomblade variants. These basically are there to just kill a creature, and all have some different kind of drawbacks. Of these, I think Feed the Swarm is probably the best in the deck, as being able to answer any enchantments that mess with our graveyard could be huge. Then for some more board wipes, we have the tried and tested Damnation, followed by some artifact removal in the form of Oblivion Stone and Nev's Disc. The artifacts will work in our graveyard with our commander, which is kind of cool in a pinch if everything has gone really badly. Moving over to our protection, this is not a section that we can really scrimp on. Our opponents will be marking us for death the moment we sit down with our combo-tastic commander. First up is obviously Lightning Greaves and Swiftfoot Boots. The protection will be fantastic, and if I'm honest, the added haste, meaning we can combo up straight away, will be even better. Just be careful in case any of your own combo lines involve targeting, as the Greaves does give Shroud. Then we have some spells that can return Trazyn to the battlefield if it ever gets removed. Board wipes just happen in Commander. Having one of these ready to slap onto Trazyn will lead you safe in the knowledge that our chances of untapping with it are way higher. You also have a card like Crypt as well, which is a repeatable source of the same effect, which is quite nice. And then because some monsters run Jukabog, running cards like Wand of Vertebrae and Perpetual Timepiece are fantastic ways of keeping our lovely graveyard safe. The fact they mill us as well is just gravy. Okay, the Wincon section is going to be a little bit briefer than normal, and that's mainly because the combo section kind of took its thunder a little bit. But first up, we have 1000 Year Elixir. This is an artifact we actually want to play, as it means that we can activate Trazyn the moment that it comes out, for some insta-win fun. For us at least, anyway. If you're feeling a bit flashy with your infinite mana combos, why not make Trazyn infinitely large and give it flying, trample and haste to swing through and smush an opponent, by running a card like Golem Artisan. More likely you're just going to give it haste so you can combo off straight away, but it's still a nice thought. For some combo redundancy, you can look to run Mikaeus the Unhallowed. This combos with Walking Ballista and Triskelion to ping out your opponents. As you're already running them, slipping in Mikaeus is a nice little backup. Mikaeus gives all of our creatures Undying, meaning if they die, they come back in with a +1/+1 counter on them. With Ballista, you just remove the counters to ping an opponent, it dies, comes back with a counter, you ping, it dies, and comes back again, round and round. With Triskelion, you have to ping your opponents but save the last shot for itself, so it dies and comes back and starts looping again. And then again for some redundancy, you have Necrotic Ooze. This basically acts as another copy of Trazyn, but only for our creature combos. This might not be necessary, but it mainly depends on how much removal you think your playgroup will be packing. And then last up is everyone's favourite Dark Ritual. Why is this a Wincon, you may ask? Well, with this commander, your opponents will be consistently counting the amount of mana that you can make, so they can work out how many turns they have to find the bit of removal to stop Trazyn going off. Dark Ritual really screws with the math, and can bring our commander out 2 turns earlier than everyone thought it would be. This means we can catch them off guard and ripe for a comboing. Rounding off the deck with some utility lands, as we're a monocoloured deck, there's a few cool options that we can run. First up, in any mono black deck, Nykthos Shrine to Nyx is a great place to start for some additional ramp. You then have a card like War Room, which is fantastic at giving us some extra card draw throughout the hopefully short game. Then Command Beacon is a solid way of getting Trazyn back for cheap, if it's ever been removed a few too many times. Then Vault of Whispers is an interesting one. It doesn't really combo with our commander, but does let us tap it for a black mana. It's a small thing, but as it's basically free to run, you might as well. And then you can look to running your own Bojuka Bog, to answer any opponent's graveyards. I know I called people who run them monsters earlier, but I'm also a bit of a hypocrite. Removing other people's graveyards is fine. If ours is ever removed, that's just completely unjustified. The rest of your mana base will be very dependent on what you have available to you. We've recently released a video with some advice on building a deck with a budget mana base, which might be of help. Until next time, please like, share and subscribe, and let us know down in the comments if there are any commanders you'd like to see a deck tech on. Thank you very much for watching.